Russia's war machines are depleting, and quiet diplomacy begins behind closed doors. In the early days of the war in Ukraine, Russian armored columns thundered across the border with confidence. Tanks rolled in with red flags, soldiers expected a swift operation, and President Vladimir Putin projected a narrative of strength and inevitability. But 2.5 years later, that illusion is cracking. The machinery of war, both literal and political, is wearing thin. On the surface, Moscow still speaks the language of defiance, but behind closed doors, a quieter reality is taking shape. Russia's war machines are depleting, and whispers of negotiation are growing louder in Kremlin corridors. The war machine slows. From the moment Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022, it leaned heavily on its Soviet-era stockpiles. T-72 tanks, aging missile systems, and thousands of artillery pieces were pulled from reserves, refurbished, and pushed into combat. But nearly 3 years of brutal attrition has exacted a heavy toll. Over 3,500 Russian tanks are estimated to have been destroyed or captured. Artillery losses are now in the tens of thousands, with shell shortages becoming acute by late 2024. Drone production lags behind Ukraine's NATO-assisted capabilities. Conscripts and contract soldiers are increasingly reluctant, poorly trained, and suffering from plunging morale. Russia has resorted to pulling T-54s and T-62s, tanks designed in the 1950s and 60s, from deep storage. Ammunition factories are running around the clock, but the pace can't match the demand. Sanctions have choked off key components needed for high-precision weapons, especially semiconductors and optics. The once mighty Russian military is now waging a 21st century war with 20th century tools, and time is no longer on its side. The tech gap widens. Ukraine, backed by Western intelligence and weaponry, has adapted faster than Moscow ever anticipated. Precision HIMARS strikes, NATO-supplied air defenses, and superior drone reconnaissance have turned the tide on many fronts. In contrast, Russian forces struggle with aging logistics systems, outdated maps, and over-reliance on brute force. Russian losses in armored vehicles and officers have forced Moscow to rely on irregular units, Wagner remnants, local militias, and prison conscripts. Despite showy unveilings of new weapon systems like the Su-57 or T-14 Armata, very few ever reach the front in significant numbers. Many are still in prototype phases or lack critical imported parts. Russia may still outnumber Ukraine in many categories, but quantity is no longer compensating for qualitative decay. Negotiations in the shadows. Publicly, the Kremlin maintains its hardline stance. No retreat, no compromise, no concessions. But beneath the surface, Russian envoys have reportedly been reaching out to intermediaries in Turkey, China, and neutral states to explore what a ceasefire or frozen conflict might look like. Key signs include increased diplomatic activity in Ankara and Beijing, where Russian diplomats are holding unofficial discussions on post-conflict architecture. Leaked intelligence suggesting Moscow has floated proposals involving territorial recognition swaps or demilitarized zones. Requests for prisoner exchanges and humanitarian corridors, often early indicators of de-escalation readiness. Even Putin's recent rhetoric has shifted subtly, from grand promises of denazifying Ukraine to more vague references to protecting Russian interests and security guarantees. This shift isn't ideological, it's logistical. The machinery can't sustain the fire. Sanctions and economic bleed. Beyond the battlefield, Russia's economy is feeling the war's full weight. Sanctions have gutted foreign investment, limited oil revenue channels, and sparked a brain drain of engineers, tech workers, and military-aged men. The ruble continues to wobble. Inflation is rising. And behind the scenes, even loyal oligarchs are privately questioning the long-term viability of a war that seems increasingly unwinnable, or at best, unwelcome. Weapons production has become unsustainable without Western parts. Factories repurpose washing machine chips to build drones. Innovation is stalled. Russia is leaning heavily on Iranian drones and North Korean shells, a sign of desperation rather than dominance. Image versus reality. Despite this erosion, Putin continues to project an image of strength. State media churns out footage of missile tests, battlefield victories, and patriotic parades. The Russian people are told that the West is faltering, that victory is near, that Ukraine is crumbling, but on the ground the story is different. Troops rotate home demoralized. Families receive body bags in silence. Military bloggers, once loyal, now post critical updates about poor leadership, faulty gear, and futile assaults. Subscribe for more videos.